Welcome back to The Denial Machine, Episode 5, Building the Case.
Elena Vasquez had been awake for 36 hours straight, her dining room table transformed into a war room of documents, laptops, and coffee cups. The priority protocol's evidence that Sarah had provided was sprawled across every available surface: internal memos, financial projections, executive communications, and claim files that painted a devastating picture of systematic healthcare discrimination. Her editor at the Tribune, David Kim, had cleared his schedule for the morning to review what Elena was calling the insurance industry's Watergate. But Elena knew that having explosive evidence wasn't enough. She needed bulletproof verification, multiple sources, and legal review before they could publish a story that would trigger federal investigations and potentially criminal charges. At 7:30 a.m., Elena's phone rang. Sarah Chen's name appeared on the caller ID. "Elena, I think they're planning something big. There's a van that's been parked across from my building since 5 a.m., and when I walked Jamie to the bus stop, 2 men in suits were photographing us from a distance." Elena rubbed her exhausted eyes. "Sarah, you need to get somewhere safe. Today. This story is going to break within 48 hours. But if they neutralize you before then, I can't run now. Elena, I just got a call from another MetLife adjuster, someone named Lisa Park. She says she's been tracking the same patterns I found, and she has additional evidence." Elena sat up straighter. "Another whistleblower?" She's scared, but she's willing to talk. "Elena, if there are other employees who've discovered the priority protocols independently, it proves this isn't just my interpretation of ambiguous data. Can you set up a meeting? I need to interview her directly. She'll only meet with both of us together. She doesn't trust journalists she doesn't know, and she doesn't want to be alone with this information." Elena checked her watch. Her meeting with David Kim was at 10, but corroborating sources were critical for the story's credibility. Where and when? Oak Street Beach, North End at 9:30. She chose a public place where surveillance would be difficult. After hanging up with Sarah, Elena spent 20 minutes organizing her evidence files. The executive communications that Marcus Rivera had provided were the smoking gun that proved intent at the highest corporate levels. But additional witnesses would transform the story from a single whistleblower's allegations into a systematic exposé of industry-wide practices. Elena packed her recording equipment and headed to Oak Street Beach, driving through Chicago's morning traffic while mentally preparing questions for the new source. She needed to establish Lisa Park's credibility, understand what independent evidence she possessed, and determine whether her discoveries aligned with or expanded on Sarah's findings. The beach was nearly empty at 9:30, with only a few joggers and dog walkers taking advantage of the cool October morning. Elena spotted Sarah sitting on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan, looking composed but alert. A few minutes later, a young Asian woman approached nervously, glancing around as if expecting to be followed. "Lisa Park," the woman said, extending her hand to Elena. "Sarah told me you're the journalist working on the MetLife story." Lisa appeared to be in her late 20s, with the careful demeanor of someone who had spent considerable time thinking through the implications of what she was about to reveal. "I've been a claims adjuster for 4 years, Lisa began, settling onto the bench between Sarah and Elena. "I work in the chronic care division, handling long-term treatment claims for patients with diabetes, heart disease, kidney disorders. About 6 months ago, I started noticing that our denial rates were increasing dramatically." "What kind of increases?" Elena asked, her recording device capturing the conversation. "In my division, we went from denying about 12% of claims to denying nearly 40%. But it wasn't random. The denials were clustered around specific patient profiles: elderly minorities, low-income families, people living in certain zip codes." Sarah leaned forward. "Were you seeing the same non-standard denial language that I found?" "Not just the language. I was seeing systematic targeting that felt deliberate. Patients who had been receiving coverage for years suddenly had their treatments deemed unnecessary or experimental. Diabetics denied insulin pump coverage. Heart patients denied cardiac rehabilitation. Kidney patients denied dialysis support." Elena felt her pulse quickening. "Lisa, did you document these patterns?" "I did more than document them. I ran statistical analyses comparing our division's denial rates to historical averages and to other MetLife divisions. The chronic care population is being systematically eliminated from coverage. Lisa pulled out a flash drive. I have spreadsheets showing denial rates by demographic, geographic targeting maps, and internal emails discussing chronic care optimization strategies. Elena took the flash drive, realizing that Lisa Park had conducted an even more comprehensive analysis than Sarah's initial investigation. Lisa, why are you coming forward now? Because last week, a 12-year-old girl in my caseload died from complications of type 1 diabetes after we denied coverage for continuous glucose monitoring. Her family couldn't afford the equipment on their own, and she had a severe hypoglycemic episode that could have been prevented. Lisa's voice broke as she continued. Her name was Emma Rodriguez. She was in 7th grade. She loved soccer and wanted to be a veterinarian. And she died because MetLife decided that keeping her alive wasn't cost-effective. Elena and Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing the devastating human cost of the priority protocols. A 12-year-old girl had died because corporate algorithms had determined her medical needs were unprofitable. Lisa, Elena said gently, are you prepared to go on the record with Emma's story? I have her family's permission. Her parents want the world to know what MetLife did to their daughter. They want to make sure no other family goes through what they've experienced. After the beach meeting, Elena drove directly to the Tribune to meet with her editor. David Kim was a 20-year veteran of investigative journalism who had broken major stories about corporate malfeasance, political corruption, and public health scandals. If anyone could navigate the legal and ethical complexities of publishing the MetLife exposé, it was David. Elena, this is the most damning corporate evidence I've seen in 15 years, David said, reviewing the priority protocols documents. But it's also the most legally dangerous story we've ever considered publishing. Dangerous how? MetLife is a multi-billion-dollar corporation with unlimited legal resources. If we get anything wrong, any fact that can't be verified, any interpretation that can be challenged, they'll use those errors to discredit the entire story and potentially destroy the Tribune with defamation lawsuits. Elena understood the concern, but she also understood the stakes. David, if we don't publish the story, MetLife continues systematically denying healthcare coverage to vulnerable populations. People die while we worry about legal liability. And if we publish this story incorrectly, MetLife uses our errors to discredit the allegations completely, and people still die while the company escapes accountability. David pulled up a legal pad and began making notes. Here's what we need before publication. Independent verification of the priority protocols documents from a second source, statistical analysis of MetLife's denial rates from an external expert, legal review of every claim we make, and responses from MetLife's executive leadership to specific allegations. How long will that take? Done properly? A week? Maybe 10 days? Elena felt the weight of time pressure. Sarah was under increasing surveillance, Lisa Park was risking her career, and MetLife was probably developing counter-strategies to neutralize both whistleblowers before the story could break. David, what if we don't have 10 days? What if MetLife moves to silence the sources before we can publish? Then we balance journalistic integrity against urgent public interest. Elena, this story could trigger federal investigations, congressional hearings, and criminal prosecutions. We have an obligation to get it right. The next morning, Elena received a call that changed everything. Lisa Park was sobbing on the other end of the line, barely coherent through her panic. Elena, they fired me. Security escorted me out of the building this morning. They're saying I violated computer security protocols and stole proprietary information. But Elena, they also searched my apartment. What do you mean, searched your apartment? Men with a warrant. Federal agents, they said, investigating corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. They took my computers, my files, everything. Elena, they're treating me like a criminal. Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. MetLife wasn't just using private investigators and legal intimidation. They were using federal law enforcement resources to criminalize the whistleblowing. Lisa, do you have an attorney? They gave me a card for a public defender, but Elena, I don't think I can continue helping with the story. They're saying I could face federal charges for computer fraud and theft of trade secrets. After Lisa hung up, Elena immediately called David Kim and the Tribune's legal team. MetLife's strategy was becoming clear. Use federal law enforcement to criminalize document leakage, making it impossible for sources to cooperate with journalistic investigations. David, if they can criminalize whistleblowing by claiming trade secret theft, they can shut down any investigative reporting about corporate wrongdoing, which is exactly why we need to publish this story immediately. Elena, if we wait much longer, they'll find ways to silence all our sources and suppress all the evidence. Elena finished her final edits at midnight, crafting a story that would expose one of the largest corporate conspiracies in American healthcare history. The headline read, "The Denial Machine: How MetLife Systematically Eliminated Healthcare Coverage for Vulnerable Populations." The story documented everything: the priority protocol's algorithms, the executive-level conspiracy, the demographic targeting, the financial incentives, and the human cost measured in preventable deaths and suffering. At the center of the exposé were the whistleblowers who had risked everything to reveal the truth. Sarah Chen, the methodical claims adjuster, who had noticed patterns that others missed. Lisa Park, the chronic care specialist who had documented systematic elimination of expensive patients. And Marcus Rivera, the conflicted supervisor who had provided the evidence that proved corporate intent. Elena's story would trigger federal investigations, congressional hearings, and criminal prosecutions. It would also destroy the careers and potentially the lives of everyone who had helped expose the conspiracy. But as Elena prepared to submit the story for publication, she thought about Emma Rodriguez, the 12-year-old diabetic who had died because MetLife decided her life wasn't cost-effective. She thought about Dorothy Martinez, pressured into withdrawing her cancer treatment appeal. She thought about thousands of patients whose legitimate medical needs had been systematically denied by algorithms designed to maximize corporate profits. The story had to be told, regardless of the personal cost to those brave enough to tell it. Elena hit publish and watched as the story went live on the Tribune's website, beginning a chain of events that would either hold MetLife accountable for systematic healthcare discrimination or demonstrate the overwhelming power of corporate interests to suppress inconvenient truths. Either way, Sarah Chen's decision to investigate mysterious denial patterns had unleashed forces that would reshape the American healthcare system.
Thank you for listening to Episode 5 of The Denial Machine. Please find Episode 6 in the description below.